You know, I have told this story a long time ago, about, I don't know, 2 years ago, I think. But since it's been long buried on my videos, I don't even know which video it was, where it is, or... So I thought, for those of you who are new to the channel, I thought I'd entertain you a little bit, to give you a little bit of a family background history of my mom and my dad, which both of them are long gone. Alright, let's start with my dad. My dad was born and raised in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. They were pretty wealthy, let's put it that way. It was a time and era where they had those high pollutant high society, families, and so what my dad tells me anyway. His dad was a metallurgy. He knew a lot of things about stainless steel. In fact, it goes all the way to many generations, from Johann Vollrath, I think it is, all the way from Germany. Anyway, they started this company in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, called the Vollrath Stainless Steel, and they were pretty big. They were a very successful company. In fact, in World War II, some of you out there that are probably older, or maybe worked in a hospital, would probably remember this. In World War II, the Vollrath stainless steel supplied many of the surgical instruments of the U.S. Army. I remember as a little boy, I remember the U.S. Army was big and present in 1945 in the Philippines. I remember growing up, and they still had those canteens and army supplies with Vollrath stainless steel, and also with aluminum, or for my European friends, aluminium. So anyway, they were pretty big. They were very successful business people. Now, on my dad's mom's side, they were the bankers of Sheboygan, Wisconsin. They themselves were pretty darn big too. So yeah, my dad was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, I guess. But God put a monkey wrench on the whole beautiful setup, I guess. My dad only had one brother, so there were only two of them. My uncle, whose name is John, he was one of those guys that were, well, he liked the upper class society lifestyle. Unfortunately, my dad was the oddball of the family and the monkey grease, or the grease monkey. While everybody's having a great time partying, my dad was out in the garage salvaging whatever he can, bring it home and fix it up and take it apart, put it back together. And he said when he was growing up, he was always full of grease. While everybody was wearing coat and tie, my dad was wearing grease. Oh, and supposedly my grandmother did not like that at all. Not one bit. While my grandmother had high hopes for my dad, who was the eldest, as far as being a banker or, you know, one of those high-class job, I guess. My dad did not want any part of that lifestyle. My dad said when he was growing up, he had all kinds of guns and junk machineries and cars and but anyway, my dad was the oddball of the family, and well, I think it got worse when my grandfather died. My dad's father died. My dad and my grandfather were close, but my dad and his mom were not at all that close. So when my dad was old enough to be, I think at the age of 18, he wanted to become a sailor. Not a Navy sailor, a merchant marine sailor, civilian sailor. Well, he sailed around the Great Lakes until he was 21, I think. But when he got to be 21, then he signed up to be a sailor on the big high seas. And so he did that. He became a sailor and sailed around the world a few times. Started as a deckhand, worked himself as a chief engineer, I think he was. Yeah, my dad knew a lot about diesel engines, the big ones. But would you have it? My dad and his ship was sent to the Philippines to pick up Dole pineapple. Not Dole, Del Monte. Pick up Del Monte pineapples there in Mindanao. And for some odd reason, he just jumped off ship and just quit his job, became a bum in Mindanao, and I don't know how long it went, but my dad was also not, how would I put it, he wasn't too street smart at that time, and he was taken advantage of and mistreated by the locals, and they downshift here. As Lynn Block says, I gotta keep the RPM high to keep the engine cool. Look at this, they got 4G network right here in the middle of nowhere. Out there in Needles, California, where the populations are, there's no 4G network. Kind of weird. Well, anyway, one day when my dad got into a stink with the locals, my mom came into the picture. My mom was, well, she was highly educated. No, I don't know, she highly educated. She newly graduated as a school teacher, I guess. And at that era, there wasn't too many educated people at that time, I suppose. It was a turn of a century or an era just after the war. And it happened to be that particular place where my dad was one of the many bus stops. Climb, Blue, climb. Well, the bus was stopping over to drop off and pick up passengers. My dad saw an American guy got into an argument with a whole bunch of people, and I remember my mom was only what, 5'2". She was a very small girl. And what did my mom do? She rushed out of that bus and just ran into the crowd where my dad was and just started screaming and yelling at the people. Why are you guys treating this American this way? And, well, she became his knight in shining armor. To my dad's surprise, my mom spoke pretty good English. Now remember, you gotta also remember that in the culture of the Philippines at that time, or even now, you know, they were proper, and they were, when it comes to women or girls and guys anyway, they were very conservative to boyfriends and girlfriends and all that stuff. You usually had to ask permission to your parents and all that stuff. So anyway, my mom never got to the big city where she was going. Instead, she turned around and brought my dad home. Now, usually, you know, at that time, you don't bring an American or a guy home less than American to your very conservative father. Well, my mom did. I guess my dad ended up living with my mom's family for a certain time. Separate beds, separate, you know, as a guest. You know, it didn't take long before my brother came out, I guess. So they got married, they got kids, and my dad ended up living in the Philippines for the last, I don't know, for the whole 45 years. My dad spoke very fluent Bisaya. He adopted the culture, became really famous back in this time. Everywhere you go in Mindanao, you could always ask, or everybody would shout, you know, "Hey, Jack." Growing up as a little boy, I saw that everywhere we went. I kid you not, everywhere we went, somebody would always come up to him, either knew of him, or I guess at that time there wasn't too many Americans that lived in Mindanao. And I would imagine he stood out of the crowd. At first, I guess we lived in a city called Bugo, B-U-G-O, from I was born in 68. I was born in Cagayan de Oro. But in 1974, he packed up and left and moved to the island of Camiguin Island in the barrio of Liong, L-I-O-N-G, Liong Ginsiliban, Camiguin Island. Man, I remember that island had no running water, no electricity, nothing. That was total dark. That island was dark even. Oh, look at that beautiful car. Wow, look at that. Phoenix Drake. What is that? I remember back, still way up until the 1980s, that island was still dark. But as soon as my dad lived in that island, it didn't take long before we had our own electricity. We had our own running water, our own indoor plumbing. And it was, the thing that really was amazing to me was, here I was living in a modern family, and just right outside our property was, you know, the native surroundings, native children. And I kind of grew up and lived in both worlds. I would play with my native friends. Then I would go home to an American home. It was great. It was kind of enjoyed that. I mean, until to this day, I could really just appreciate that, you know. And our barrio was that big. I mean, talk about, we knew each other, every family. In fact, I don't think there was a house in that barrio I didn't slept in, you know, slept in. And we were very close-knit people in that barrio. By 1979, almost to 1980, we migrated back here, or my dad and I and my brother, we came and lived here in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. But first we went to Western Samoa, American Samoa, Hawaii, also by 1983, almost 1984, wouldn't you know it, my dad had the sickness called homesickness, and he went back to the Philippines again. But overall, he lived there for about 45 years. It was always his last request that if he ever died, he would like to be buried back in the island. So by the year 2000, I think, he died back here in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So my dad, my brother and I, we shipped him home, and he is buried back there in his property. Which is kind of funny because sometimes if you Google Earth his property, you could actually see his grave. You can see a little white spot because the graves in the Philippines are above ground. Not like over here in the northern United States where the graves are below ground. So sometimes I get the feeling of missing my dad. I would pay him a visit through Google Earth. And the last time I was home in the Philippines was back in 2000, when my brother and I brought him home. There's a lot more to this story, but for the time's sake, those are the highlights. By now, I guess many of you are probably curious to what happened to my dad's family wealth. Well, it never came. It never came to him anyway. Remember, my dad and my mom, my dad and his mom were not very close at all. Everything went to his brother. That's just the way life works, I guess. Man, I can't believe how strong the 4G network is out here in the middle of the desert. I suppose that's all I got for now. I see a very, very long train over there. I'm not even going to bother trying to point you that way because it's pretty far. But it's got it's got four engines in it. And probably one behind it. Man, that thing's got to be at least 4 miles long. Pulling containers. Anyway, I'll catch you guys later. Have a good and godly day, everyone. Friendly reminder, today is the day of salvation. Remember, there's only one name given under the heavens in which we will be saved, and that is Jesus Christ. If you don't believe me, read the Bible. You'll see it. In fact, I encourage you to read it. Good day.